The thing is, privacy always looked clean to me. It had edges, like a file closed correctly, with no loose pages showing. 3 drawers, 2 passwords, 1 life that did not need an internal review. At the insurance office, that made me good at my job. My name is Ingrid Holm. I was 42, a senior compliance manager, and most days I sat under white ceiling panels reading reports about people who had said one thing and done another. I knew how small omissions became material facts when someone placed them in order. I knew how a dinner receipt, a deleted message, or a half answer could become a record. That Tuesday evening, I deleted a draft comment because it sounded too judgmental. The report was about an adjuster who had hidden a client call. My silver transit card holder sat beside my keyboard, open like a tiny metal book. Inside was a note about rain written on the back of a grocery receipt. Henrik put weather notes there because I hated checking forecasts. I remember the blue ink. I do not remember whether I smiled. Henrik was my husband. 9 years together, married 6. Every April, we used to sit at our dining table with take-out noodles and review our savings plan. Then we picked one small home repair to finish together. One year it was the loose bathroom tile. One year it was the cabinet hinge that clicked every time the kitchen warmed up. Those were good evenings. Boring on paper. Warm in the room. His floor was already there, small enough to miss. If something felt tense, Henrik made it practical. He brought receipts, lists, options. He treated silence like weather that would pass if the windows were sealed. When he called that night, he asked why I used to tell him small things and now only gave him finished facts. His voice was soft, curious. He wanted to know what had changed. I heard inspection. The thing is, after my mother read my diary aloud when I was 16, curiosity never sounded innocent again. I told Henrik I did not need an internal review at home. He went quiet long enough for my desk lamp to hum. Later, Jessa stopped by my cubicle with a packet of cinnamon gum and said marriage should not have access to every file. She meant it as a joke. I took it as permission. At home, Henrik had placed another weather note in the card holder on the hallway table. I left it unopened beside my keys. The restaurant consulting site smelled like fresh paint and burnt coffee from a machine no one had cleaned yet. Rafi Haddad stood near the half-built bar, holding a yellow tape measure like he owned the room by not trying to own it. He was 39, worked as an independent restaurant consultant, and spoke in a way that made questions feel optional. That was new to me. At work, every sentence had weight. At home, every silence had a shadow. With Rafi, things could stay floating. The thing is, floating felt like freedom when your life had become a set of labelled folders. He asked if I always explained myself before anyone asked. I told him compliance had ruined normal speech for me. He said I did not have to explain anything to him. That should have sounded lazy. It sounded merciful. We were reviewing vendor flow for a new dining room, but half the meeting drifted into stories. He told me about a failed pop-up in Lisbon. I told him about the internal reports I read every week, the little lies people thought were harmless until they had dates beside them. He laughed and said, I must be hard to lie to. I said that depended on whether I wanted the answer. He looked at me then. Not like Henrik looked when he was trying to understand what I meant. Rafi looked like he accepted the version of me that did not want to be understood. 1 look, 2 coffees, no questions. By the second meeting, I had started calling it work adjacent in my head. That is how bad decisions begin when you work in compliance. You make them sound technical. You make them sound clean. After the restaurant walkthrough, Rafi suggested dinner so we could discuss the tasting menu. It was not quite a meeting. It was not quite not a meeting. The receipt later said 2 tasting menus, orange peel drinks, and 1 shared dessert I barely remember ordering. I remember the server's green nail polish perfectly. I do not remember who reached for the check first. I used the joint card. The thing is, the restaurant was tied to a client, and the card was already in my wallet, and our household account covered professional expenses when reimbursement came later. That was the explanation. It had enough structure to stand if nobody leaned on it. At home, Henrik was at the dining table with his laptop and a bowl of tomato soup. The microwave clock said 9:31. He had put my transit card holder beside my plate, with another note tucked inside. I did not open that one either. He asked how the vendor meeting went. I said it was fine, and that a supplier group had run long. He asked if the supplier group was one person because the receipt on the joint account said 2 tasting menus. There it was, specific and factual. No raised voice, no accusation with a name attached. Just a receipt. I heard a complaint file opening. I told him it was a minor issue. I said he was reading financial data like an investigator. He said he was reading a charge from our account after I had told him something different. I said the thing is, not every mismatch was a material fact. That was the wrong sentence to use with a man who had spent 6 years believing my precision meant safety. He looked down at his soup. The skin had formed on top because he had waited for me before eating. He stirred it once, slowly, then said he was not asking as a banker. He was asking as my husband. I answered that being my husband did not give him audit rights over my day. He did not answer that. He carried his bowl to the sink and rinsed it without eating more. The next morning, Jessa leaned over the fabric wall between our cubicles and asked if my mysterious restaurant consultant had good hands for menu boards. She always made things sound playful when they were close to being wrong. Jessa's own marriage had gone quiet years before, but she stayed because leaving would require saying out loud that nothing was left. Watching me step outside the lines gave her a kind of second-hand air. I told her Rafi was easy to talk to. She said rules made everything safer, even bad ideas. Mara heard that from the copier. Mara Klein had been my friend long enough to know when I was dressing up a thing. She liked being trusted with secrets, though. Secrets made her feel central in rooms where she often felt like the extra chair. So she did not challenge me. Not then. She only asked whether Henrik knew Rafi's name. I said Henrik did not need a name for every work contact. Mara changed the toner cartridge and did not look at me when she said that work contacts did not usually need hiding. The printer clicked and flashed low cyan. Jessa laughed because silence made her nervous. I laughed because being challenged in front of someone felt like exposure. The thing is, exposure always takes me back to that kitchen when I was 16. My mother waving my diary, my father staring at the tiles, my private sentences turned into family weather. After that, a locked drawer felt like dignity. Rafi became the locked drawer. Priya noticed later at book club. She asked why I kept stepping into the hallway when my phone lit up. I said it was a client. She asked if the client had a name. I said people were becoming strange about normal boundaries. That was enough to make her stop asking and start watching. By Friday, the dinner receipt had become small gossip without anyone calling it gossip. Caleb asked if the new restaurant was good. Saul asked Henrik whether he was coming to Sunday walks. Mara stopped sending me voice notes and began texting instead, shorter each time. Henrik stopped asking casual questions. That was the first real cost, though I called it peace. The Brass Fig private dining room had velvet curtains the colour of dark plums and a brass sconce that made everyone look like they had better skin. The table was set for 4 with thick water glasses, white plates, and folded napkins shaped like envelopes. Warm bread sat in a cast-iron dish, and every drink came with a strip of orange peel twisted over the rim. Jessa chose the place because she said, if we were going to discuss complicated women, we should have better butter. Mara came because she always came when invited. Priya came late, shaking rain from her coat and apologizing to the room before anyone blamed her. The shared laptop sat on the sideboard. That detail matters, though it did not look like it mattered then. Earlier that evening, Henrik had helped me fix an invoice spreadsheet for the Brass Fig because the formulas had broken and the owner was impatient. He had joined through an audio call while I sat in that same room before dinner. When the sheet worked, I thanked him, closed the lid halfway, and moved on. Halfway is not closed. The thing is, I knew that. Professionally, I knew it. Personally, I treated it like a minor issue. 3 friends, 2 drinks, 1 active call icon hidden by the dim screen. Jessa asked about Raffi before the appetizers arrived. She asked it like a person opening a gift. I said there was not much to tell, which meant there was much to tell, but I wanted to control the order. Mara looked at the bread basket. Priya reached for water. I told them Raffi was not a threat because he did not want anything heavy. I said it was a friendship with benefits, then laughed before anyone else could decide how serious to be. I kept it non-specific, clever, manageable. I made it sound like a category, not a betrayal. Jessa laughed first. She said adults were allowed to have arrangements. She said the word arrangements like it had upholstery and rules. Priya said marriage was not a filing cabinet but still had locks for a reason. I told her locks could keep people inside too. Mara asked if Henrik knew any part of this. Her voice had changed. Less curious, more careful. I told her Henrik knew I needed space. The thing is, that sounded almost honest. Space was the word I used when I did not want to say secrecy. Then Jessa asked whether Raffi made me feel wanted. I said he made me feel unrecorded. I said Henrik recorded everything without meaning to. Weather notes, receipts, calendar reminders, savings plans. I said my husband could turn love into a spreadsheet and then wonder why I wanted one part of my life with no columns. They laughed softly, except Priya. That would have been bad enough. Then I shared the thing Henrik had trusted me with. I told them he once said he was afraid he was too safe to be wanted. I said it with a small smile like it proved my point. Like his fear was a clever line in a story about me. The warm bread cooled beside my plate. Orange peel oil shone on the surface of my drink. Mara's fingers stopped tearing her napkin. The room did not go silent all at once. Real rooms rarely do. A server came in to ask whether we wanted more butter. Jessa said yes because she did not know what else to do. Priya moved her water glass 2 inches to the left. Mara looked toward the sideboard. That was when she saw the laptop. The screen had woken slightly. A small call icon sat near the bottom corner. Mara stared at it, then at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out in time. The call ended. No dramatic click, no voice through the speakers. The icon disappeared, and the dark screen reflected the 4 of us at the table like a bad group photo. The thing is, I still tried to make it smaller in my head. Maybe he had stepped away. Maybe the sound had not carried. Maybe he had heard only the end, only the wrong part, only enough to misunderstand. That is how a person bargains with a record before reading it. Jessa asked if the laptop had been connected. She whispered it, which was stupid because whispering after the fact has no function. Priya pushed her chair back and said she needed the restroom. Mara told me she thought Henrik had been on the call. I said he should not have been listening. Mara said I had asked him to be there earlier. I said that was different. She asked how it was different. I told her I was not having this conversation in a restaurant. Wrong response. Not because it was false, because it proved I still thought location was the issue. When I got home, Henrik was sitting in the living room with the small lamp on, the one with the crooked shade. His shoes were lined up by the door. My transit card holder was on the hallway table, unopened notes still inside. He did not ask where I had been. He knew the room, the voices, the order in which I had made him smaller. He asked for a quiet explanation. That was his S3 voice. Not loud. Not even sharp. He said he had stayed on the call because he thought I was coming back to ask about the spreadsheet. He said he heard Jessa ask about Raffi, heard me say arrangement, heard my friends laugh, heard me repeat his private fear. He did not say the word betrayal. Maybe he did not need to. Maybe he knew I would argue with the word instead of the wound. I told him private conversations were allowed. He said privacy was not the same as making him the joke inside one. I said he was turning one overheard dinner into a formal record. He said I had done that myself. There was a pause then. I filled it because silence has always made me feel cornered. I said he had no right to sit inside a conversation meant for my friends. He said he had not sat inside it. He had been left there. Jessa texted while we were speaking. One line asking if I was okay. Mara texted nothing. Priya left the group chat before midnight. I knew because her name vanished from the thread while I was still standing in the living room. Henrik went to the hallway table, took the weather note from the card holder, and placed it in his pocket. The card holder stayed open and empty under the lamp. 2 days later, Saul's backyard smelled like wet cedar and charcoal that had not caught yet. His dog kept carrying a tennis ball to the wrong person. Caleb stood by the grill with a paper plate of cut onions, pretending food needed more attention than the people around it. I had gone because staying home with Henrik's silence felt like sitting in an archive after closing. The thing is, a social room gives you options. You can choose your angle. You can test which version people will accept. I told Saul and Priya that Henrik had listened to a private conversation and crossed a boundary. I said it calmly, like a person reporting misconduct. I said nobody should be punished for venting to friends. Saul did not take the frame. He said Henrik had already been on the call because I asked him to fix the spreadsheet. He said that was not the same as hunting through my phone. I said the result was the same. Priya looked at her paper cup and said results were not the only thing that mattered. That annoyed me because it sounded like a book club sentence. Mara arrived late and stood near the back fence with her coat still on. She had always liked secrets, but she did not like being made useful to one after it turned ugly. When I asked her to explain that the dinner had been normal venting, she said she could not repeat that. She said I had shared something Henrik had trusted me with. I told her she was making it moral because she liked being important. Mara's face closed. That was one more person stepping back, but I did not count it yet. 3 people near the grill. 2 empty chairs. One version of me losing air. At home, Henrik was in the bedroom folding laundry. Not angry laundry. Ordinary laundry. Socks paired, towels stacked, my navy blouse placed on the chair because it needed hanging. The smallness of it made me talk too fast. I told him Saul had taken his side. He said Saul had heard enough. I told him Mara was acting wounded because she wanted power over the story. He said Mara was trying not to lie. Then he named the pattern. He said it was not only the brass fig. It was the dinner receipt, the supplier group that was not a group, the phone turned over, the way I called him safe in rooms where safe meant lesser. It was the joint card and the calendar gaps. It was me treating his patience like permission to keep building a second door out of the marriage. I used controlled partial truth because full denial had become too weak. I told him Rafi made me feel like I still had a private self. I said there had to be a part of me that was not tracked by weather notes, savings plans, shared accounts, and questions asked gently enough to sound innocent. I expected that to soften him. I expected him to admit that his quiet had walls. He sat on the edge of the bed. For a minute he looked older than 44. He said he gave me that fear because he thought marriage made it safe to say. He meant the fear about being too safe to be wanted. That was his vulnerable moment. Simple, not strategic. No file, no careful list. Just a man in a bedroom with folded towels beside him, saying he had trusted the wrong room. I misread it because seeing it correctly would have required stopping. I said he was using sadness as leverage. He stood then and went to the dresser. On top of it was my silver transit card holder. He had placed it there with a printed call log. No title, no speech. Just the date, the call duration, and the time from the brass fig. The card holder sat beside it, empty. The opening came there. The metal had a small scratch near the hinge from the year I dropped it on the train platform. Henrik had picked it up then and said it was still good. He had tucked notes inside it for years. Rain at 4. Take the blue umbrella. Cold by evening. Platform repairs. Leave 10 minutes early. Tiny care, folded down until it fit in my bag. The call log was not a trap. Not really. He had not gone looking for a private life to steal. He had been left inside mine because I was careless with the person I trusted to fix things. Then he waited. He waited for me to tell him what I knew he had heard. He waited while I went to Saul's yard and called his pain a violation. I almost saw the shape of it. Not guilt, something plainer. A line on a page that did not move no matter how I described it. My hand touched the card holder. The metal was cold. Then I closed the door. I said printing call logs looked like surveillance. I said his patience was just another form of control because he stored things until they could be used. I said this was why I needed privacy. He looked at the card holder, then at me, and something practical entered his face. After that, he started organizing shared account records on the dining table. Not in secret, not loudly. Folders, receipts, statements, a yellow legal pad with no legal words on it. The joint card dinner receipt lay near the top. I called him dramatic. He asked me to stop using household money for anything tied to Rafi. I said Rafi had nothing to do with money. Henrik said that was exactly what needed to be clear. Wrong fit again. He was trying to separate facts. I heard a man preparing a cage. Priya left the group chat that night after I posted that marriage without privacy becomes ownership. Caleb stopped inviting me to Sunday walks. I saw the photos later, Saul and Henrik under grey trees with takeaway coffees. Mara stopped answering voice notes and replied only when logistics required it. Before bed, Henrik removed the remaining weather notes from the transit card holder. He left it empty on the dresser, open like a mouth that had stopped asking. Priya's book club room was in the back of a community centre that smelled like dust, instant coffee, and old carpet. The folding chairs were arranged in a circle, though only 6 people came that week. A plate of supermarket cookies sat on the windowsill because the table leg had broken. I went because I wanted a room before Henrik's silence became the only room. The thing is, when people stop asking you questions, you lose the chance to sound reasonable. I needed witnesses who were not already looking at call logs and joint accounts. I needed a version of privacy that did not end with me standing beside a dresser and an empty card holder. The book that week was about a woman leaving a small town. I barely read it. I underlined 3 sentences in the first chapter and planned what I would say if anyone asked about marriage. Priya did not ask. That was the first insult. So I put it into the room myself. I said marriage should not mean total access. I said a person could love her husband and still need a private self. I said being overheard had shown me how quickly care could become control. Mara sat 2 chairs away, holding a paper cup with both hands. She did not correct me, but she did not help either. Her silence had weight now. Jessa was not there. She had said a client meeting ran late, though the meeting ended at 5, and book club started at 7. A woman from the group asked if this was about Henrik. She was not close to us. Her question had no malice, only bad timing. I said it was about the idea of marriage. Mara looked at the carpet. Afterward, in the parking lot, Priya told me she did not want to be used as a witness for a version she did not believe. I told her that was a harsh thing to say. She said it was less harsh than what I had said at the Brass Fig. That consequence had a small sound. Her car unlocking. 2 beeps. Her leaving. At home, Henrik was at the dining table with folders sorted by month. He had not hidden them. February joint card statement. March household transfers. April savings plan. The same table where we used to eat noodles and choose one home repair now held the account of our fracture. I told him his patience had made our home feel like a closed room where I had to confess before I was even asked. He did not refute it. He placed his pen down and said he could discuss that. He said he could discuss loneliness, privacy, and the way his silence had become pressure. He said if I wanted that conversation, he would stay in it. But he would not discuss it if the price was pretending Rafi was only a symbol and not a choice. That was final and clean. I hated clean things by then. I said he always knew how to sound fair after making the room impossible to breathe in. I said the thing is, he had never trusted me with freedom, only with tasks. I said he loved a version of me that reported back. He said he had trusted me with the emergency savings account, with our joint card, and with the fear I repeated to my friends. 3 trusts, 2 folders, 1 silence after. He said things would be handled properly. No official words, no threats. He only closed the folder marked February and placed it under the others. That was the silent decision marker. A file being closed. A husband no longer trying to be understood before acting. I told myself it was another performance of control. My phone lit up with Rafi's name then. I turned it face down too fast. Henrik saw. He did not ask. That was worse than asking. In the bedroom, I sent Jessa 4 messages. I asked whether I had sounded normal at book club. I asked if Priya had texted her. I asked if she could call for 5 minutes. I asked if everyone had decided I was the villain. Jessa replied that she had a client meeting in the morning and hoped I was taking care of myself. Nothing else. No joke. No gum packet on my desk. No sentence about unreported areas of life. Just absence dressed as scheduling. Rafi was not absent. That might have been worse. He texted that my husband sounded like the kind of man who would make things financial. He asked whether his name appeared on any receipts. He asked if I had mentioned him in writing. Then he said I should not drag him into money issues because he had never promised me anything beyond what we agreed. There it was. Agreement. Arrangement. Clean words suddenly turned away from me. I replied that he had been part of my private life. He said private did not mean shared liability. I almost admired the sentence. It sounded like something from one of my reports. The theme inversion began, though I would not have called it that. I had believed rules made the arrangements safe. No promises, no labels, no public claim. Now the lack of promises protected Rafi and left me holding the record. In the dining room, Henrik became more logistical. He asked for access dates for the joint account. He asked me to list any work reimbursement tied to the brass fig. He asked whether the dinner with Rafi had been submitted to my company. His voice stayed even. I became louder. I said he was treating me like a suspect. He said he was treating shared funds like shared funds. I said he was punishing privacy. He said privacy did not need the joint card. That sentence ended the argument because it was too plain to climb over. Later, I checked the friend group. Priya had left. Caleb had muted me or learned silence as a skill. Mara had read my message and not replied. Sewell had sent Henrik a photo from their walk. 2 paper coffee cups on a bench, no faces. By midnight, Henrik had moved the transit card holder from the dresser to the hallway table. Empty. It used to carry weather. Now it carried the absence of warning. He stopped explaining after that, and the quiet had the clean edge of a file being closed. The bank office conference room smelled like toner, wet umbrellas, and coffee burned too long on a hot plate. The table was pale wood with a cable port in the centre. Mara sat beside the window, hands folded around nothing. Henrik sat across from me with a blue folder closed in front of him. At 10:15, the bank officer placed the document on the table and asked me to confirm my name and account access dates. The document was titled Notice of Motion to Preserve Marital Assets, Freeze Joint Credit Line, and Compel Accounting of Shared Funds. The next step was listed as a financial status conference on July 9th, 2026. I put my palm on the first page to hold it flat. The paper slid anyway because my fingers were damp. I wiped them on my skirt under the table, then picked up the pen and wrote my initials beside the receipt line. The proof was not dramatic. It was worse. February dinner receipt. Joint card charge from the brass fig. Active call log from the laptop. Mara's statement that I had shared Henrik's private fear while the call was open. Rafi's deleted message pattern. The public book club comments repeated by people who had heard enough. I told the bank officer this was a private marital conflict. She tapped the page once and asked me again to confirm whether I had sole access to the joint card on the date of the charge. Not cruel, not sympathetic, just true. Rafi exited before the meeting ended. He sent one message saying he had no financial connection to me or my marriage, forwarded a neutral note showing he had never promised commitment, and deleted the shared chat before lunch. I moved into a short-stay apartment near the station because Henrik kept the house while the accounts were reviewed. The joint credit line was frozen, and every shared charge tied to Rafi had to be listed. Mara remained polite. Priya stopped inviting me to book club. Caleb stayed with the Sunday walkers, and Jessa became a calendar conflict. Rafi removed himself with one clean message and left me with the arrangement I had called safe. My office moved me off internal misconduct reviews until my own account questions stopped following me into meetings. The thing is, I thought secrecy protected the last private part of me. I thought a locked drawer meant freedom. 3 receipts, 2 statements, 1 empty card holder. What I kept from my husband became the cleanest record he had. The silver transit card holder stayed in my bag, empty of weather notes and full of nothing useful. I kept my privacy and lost the only person who had used it to care for me.